Warning, this video will have a lot of spoilers for Epic Universe. If you want your first visit to Epic to be a surprise, I would suggest not watching the majority of this video. That being said, I'll provide some recommendations and my general thoughts about the park as a whole in the end without giving any major spoilers, so if that's interesting to you, check the timestamps for that. Hey everyone, this is Ethan from Gravity Profits. We recently took a trip to the new for 2025 park, Epic Universe. This video is going to be a detailed review about all my thoughts and experiences with the park. I had some pretty high expectations going into the park due to all the hype and also my amazing experiences at the other Universal parks, both the Florida ones and Japan. I genuinely knew almost nothing about this park beforehand. Most of my knowledge consisted of seeing a short bit of Stardust POV by mistake and what each land is, but other than that I haven't seen any images. After spending 2 days there and getting a lot of time to take everything in, I think it's safe to say that this park exceeded all of those expectations and is now my new favorite park. Starting out with each land, we have Celestial Park first. Celestial Park was beautiful. After entering through the front gate, you're greeted by some gardens and gift shops, with everything looking really nice. Seeing it all open up with Stardust off to the side was such a cool experience that I'll never forget. The park was shaped kind of like a circle with a pond and the carousel in the middle and Helios in the background, and then there's also some shops and restaurants around the edges. Overall, I really like the vibe at this park. I think that was a really nice entrance, and for not being necessarily associated with an IP, I think they did a really good job. With this section serving as the central hub to the park, and having portals that take you to each theme land, they did a surprisingly good job at separating each of them from the Celestial Park. At no point did I really feel like I was getting bothered by any of the sightlines being ruined, except for one that I'll get into in a bit. Overall though, it's kind of amazing how it genuinely feels like you're traveling between different dimensions when you go to each portal. They don't really bleed into each other, and they just did a really good job with that overall. So for the attractions in Celestial Park, first we'll start with the one that I was most excited for, Stardust Racers. Unfortunately for us, Green was down for the first day and a half, and we didn't get a true duel even when it did open. I really hope that this is just something temporary that's just an issue with the ride being new. We were kind of worried that we weren't going to get any rides at all, so we're just glad that we got to get on Green a couple of times. I knew this coaster would be a contender for my top one just based on what I've heard from other people. Again, I tried my best to avoid spoilers, so other than just knowing that this coaster has a lot of airtime, I didn't really know much about it. And considering that I thought this coaster was just a bunch of airtime hills, I honestly didn't really see how it could be a top one going into it. After riding it though, I realized that it really is just a bunch of airtime hills, but I'm perfectly fine with that since airtime is pretty much my favorite coaster element. I won't go into as much detail as I will with this ride, because I could really make an entire video about it, but I'll go over my main thoughts and my main takeaways. So it starts out with a launch. It's a surprisingly strong launch considering it's made by Mach, but the bigger surprise is that immediately after the launch there's also a mini boost section that's pretty punchy. I didn't know about it the first time, so it was a pretty big surprise and a nice touch. Every airtime hill in the first half of the ride has some amazing airtime. I think it's some of the best airtime I've experienced on a coaster, and the airtime on Green just feels ever so slightly strong and more consistent, although it's good on both sides. The other thing that makes it pretty crazy is the transitions between positives and negatives, especially on the top hat, and I could see why they had to trim it shortly after opening. The amount of time between the really strong airtime on the top hat and the positives in the valley when you're in the back row was just barely breaching ASTM standards, so they had to add a trim to make it work. I think this part's my main reason for preferring Green over Yellow. There were some hills that felt stronger in this section, especially with the lead up into the second launch. Overall, they were both great, but I just thought that Green was a little better overall. Now for the second half. The second launch is again surprisingly strong for being a Mach coaster. One thing to note is that this coaster has ride music. We really like the ride music, and it kind of just added to the vibes overall. I didn't pay that much attention to it while on the first half of the ride, but one of my favorite effects is how the music becomes really dramatic and fast-paced during the launch, only to go silent during the 0G roll and the Celestial spin. I never thought ride music could actually enhance a roller coaster other than just adding to the theme, but I feel like this part wouldn't have been the same without it. It feels like the way the music pauses almost makes the weightlessness and the whippiness of this inversion feel even better. With that, I will say the Celestial spin was also amazing. In Yellow on the back row, you get a bit of airtime and then just get flung through the inversion, which makes a really cool weightless feeling. On Green, I really enjoyed the inversion itself in the front because it feels like you go through it so fast, but as a whole I really liked it in the back due to how weird it felt. You go slowly through the inversion just to be flung into an injector hill, and it's one of the best inversions in the world. I didn't really see it at first, but now I can see why this is contested with the Moses Forest roll and the Death roll for being the best inversion in the world, and I really can't imagine what it would have been like with a duel. The train's pretty much just right above you, along with everything I described. So from here on out, the rest of the ride is pretty much speed-based. On yellow, there's a surprisingly good near miss with one of green's supports. We were expecting to actually be disappointed by this section of the ride on green because we figured that the near misses on yellow would be better, but it turns out that the near misses on green were actually even crazier. So if you're on the left side of the train, it actually feels like you're super close to yellow's track. Like it feels like you could just reach out and touch yellow's track, and it's really claustrophobic and weird. I can't imagine what this would be like with a duel, because that along with the train being there must be crazy. But this part was actually better in green just due to that. And if you like near misses, this was a really nice surprise. All in all, I preferred the coaster in the back, but it was close. I felt like the airtime was actually stronger in the front at some moments, and according to our RideForce app, the strongest moment actually did occur on yellow in the front row. We're not sure exactly when. That being said, the pacing just feels off in the front since there's a lot of elements where you hang over them. I prefer the back because it was more consistent, where you're getting really strong negative airtime on all the elements, and also the celestial spin. The coaster definitely had a bit of a rattle, so that combined with how crazy the forces are just makes it a hard coaster to marathon more than a couple times in a row. The vibes in the station and queue are also great. The ride has metal detectors with free lockers using facial recognition, so no more remembering random codes and strings of numbers, only for a locker that can't even hold a small backpack. We love the lockers. They're on a lot of rides, not just this one. They're super user-friendly and effective, and also free, which is really nice. We hope Cedar Point will start implementing these, but it seems like they have bigger issues to worry about for now. Once you reach the station, there's music that plays with a different soundtrack that plays at night. It really just added to the vibes, especially with getting night rides. It just really made the experience that much better. My complaint from the queue comes from the fact that you could actually see a lot of Isle of Berk from behind it. When you're waiting in line, you could see some of the taller structures like the flat ride and the tower, but when you're in the station, you could actually see quite a bit if you look over the fence because you're so high up. I hope that they'll fix this by adding some trees or something like that to make it harder to see, but it was a little bad for the immersion. I'm glad that it was at least in queue for Stardust and not just somewhere random in Celestial Park, but it is definitely something that bothered us. We rode Stardust before riding anything else, and we were all trying to avoid spoilers, so it was just annoying having to look away because we didn't want to see much of Isle of Berk. All in all, this coaster is extremely good. The ride itself is amazing as somebody who loves airtime, and the vibes in the queue and the way they were able to implement the coaster into the theme of Celestial Park was just great. Out of 175 coasters, I have it ranked as 4 for the green side and 6 for yellow, and I actually considered even bumping it up a spot, making it Fast Steel Vengeance. I think this coaster would actually be my new number 1 if I was able to get some duels, but I guess I'll just have to wait and see. As for the other rides in Celestial Park, it's mainly just the carousel. We rode it since it started thunderstorming and it was one of the few rides that was actually open. It was strange to us. The carousel had a pretty low capacity. There were far fewer seats than I would expect from a carousel, especially for a park of this size. Aesthetically, it fit really well. I think that a normal carousel would look completely off if it just had animals and looked kind of retro, but having a sort of sci-fi futuristic space theme looked really cool, and it definitely added to the park skyline. Overall, I definitely wouldn't ride it again, nor would I have ridden it in the first place if it wasn't raining, so I really just care about how it looks and how good of an addition it is to the park. I think it's definitely a good addition aesthetically, I just don't know how good the rider capacity is. We waited about 30 minutes and it wasn't even that busy when we went. The last thing to talk about regarding Celestial Park is Pizza Moon. I will just say right off the bat that all the food in this park was amazing, and I also found the prices to be very reasonable, especially for an amusement park. I'm definitely no food critic, so I won't go too into depth about the pizza, but I did really enjoy the pizza here. If it was a standalone restaurant, I wouldn't be disappointed at all. It was also $20 for a pizza, which for me, if I ate an entire pizza, I'd definitely be pretty full after. We shared 3 pizzas 4 ways, and it was a pretty good amount of food for all of us. We definitely weren't disappointed by this, and we actually came back again on the second day because we liked it so much. There's a couple other restaurants we went to, but I think this was my second favorite, and if you only have a day in the park, I would suggest coming here for one of your meals because I really liked it. So overall, Celestial Park was awesome. It definitely wasn't forgettable at all, which is something that I was kind of thinking about. The park has 4 extremely well themed and also just iconic lands that I was really excited for, so I kind of thought that Celestial Park might just be an afterthought, at least as far as the themes are concerned. Exiting the park after some night rides on Stardust really felt special, and I think a lot of that comes down to Celestial Park itself. Just walking through and enjoying the peacefulness of the music and the scenery already made it feel nostalgic for leaving the park, even though we hadn't even left. That's something that I can only say for a couple parks, and I think it really means a lot. My last impressions are some of the most important parts of the park for me, because pretty much all I remember about a lot of my favorite parks is just how sad I was when I left and how excited I was for my next visit. And I think Celestial Park does that better than any park I've ever been to, so I just really enjoy it overall. And just thinking about walking out at night and just the peacefulness of the water and how quiet it was with the music, it was just a really awesome experience and a great way to end out the trip. Alright, so next for Isle of Berk. This is one of the first themed areas I think a lot of people would go to. This is right next to the entrance, so it's right there. And if you just enter the park and just want to explore everything, it's the logical first choice. This was one of my favorite areas, and a lot of it just came down to how realistic it looked. I've heard that it's like a one-to-one from the movies, and I could really see it. Walking through the portal and seeing it all open up was really crazy. Just seeing the tower in the background and the water in the middle with hiccups running through it was a really cool sight to see. I avoided a lot of spoilers for Epic, so pretty much my first impressions were actually seeing it in real life. I didn't know anything about it, like what Hiccups was or any of the other rides, and I just knew that pretty much it was going to be How to Train Your Dragon, and that's it. So when I just walked in and I saw the coasters, I just thought it looked really fun, and I was just really excited to see what everything was. So right off the bat, I think this is a great kids area, but along with that, I think it's a kids area that adults can enjoy too. I could see adults getting pretty bored at Nintendo Land, but this is a really fun area even for us, and we found ourselves coming back a lot. The main attraction here that I think a lot of people would know about is Hiccups, which is kind of like a better family coaster, kind of like Hagrid's at Islands of Adventure, but maybe just not as over the top. I will say that from an enthusiast point of view, this coaster had some pretty strong positive forces, and it even had some small pops of airtime. You really know that's going to be off to a good start when it has an outer bank out of the station. There's some really cool theming elements along the way and some on-ride audio that just made the ride really fun. Like the first launch where they put the wings onto the train and then you go flying. And you see Hiccup and Toothless there, it's just really cool. Pretty much my favorite part about the layouts when you go down into the area with the water, it's just really fun to interact with everything and you even get splashed a little bit. There's a part where the second launch fails and it's hidden really well so you don't know about it if you're not aware about it. You can't really see it from anywhere in the park. You kind of roll back and then they relaunch you, so it helps to increase the ride length and also just throw people for a bit of a surprise. We did also have a cool experience here where we got to see what happens when the block zones get filled up. We were on the last train and there was a train in front of us waiting on the launch, so we had to come to a stop on the first part of the brakes. After that, they launched the next train directly from the uphill part, and then they waited a bit for the block zone to clear, and then they launched us. There wasn't really anything too crazy about it, but it was just cool to see it happen, because I've heard about it a lot, but I've never actually experienced something like that, especially in a Universal attraction where a block check means it has to stop all the way in the middle of the ride. There is also some on-ride audio for when this happens, letting you know it's safe to go, so you don't get worried that the ride's just starting after a malfunction. So it was pretty cool to see that they thought it out well, despite it being something that most people shouldn't ever have to experience. So overall, this was a really great ride. I've never been on Hagrid's, so I can't really compare it to that, but it was a really fun family coaster, and I did really want to ride it again before we left. The theming in the station is also pretty cool. It's been a while since I've seen How to Train Your Dragon, but there's just a lot of references and little things that were just kind of cool to look at as I was walking through it. It definitely kind of gave off Viking-like vibes, where a lot of it was just made out of like rope and wood and simple materials like that, but it definitely didn't seem like they were doing it that way to kind of put less effort into it. There was still quite a bit of shade, and the air circulation was surprisingly good for how hot it was when we were there. This coaster also had the free lockers, which is really nice, so no need to worry about getting off-ride lockers or having to worry about your loose articles. As for some other attractions here, there's also a fire drill. It was a kind of fun ride. It was a little confusing because it seemed like some of the targets were impossible to hit with the water guns. We might be overthinking it because we're definitely older than the intended audience. Maybe if kids are on it, they really don't care and they just have fun either way. You could also splash people on the other boats, which is really fun. Overall, I can't really say too much about it, but I think it's a pretty fun family attraction. We definitely enjoyed going on it once, just because. And even though we're definitely older than the intended audience, we had some fun with it. We also saw one of the shows here. I believe there's 2 shows that regularly play in the park, one of them being here and one at Ministry. The one here is Untrainable Dragon. It was a pretty good show. I occasionally watch amusement park shows, and sometimes they're pretty cheesy, sometimes they're good. This one was a pretty good one. Again, it's definitely oriented more towards kids, so take it with a grain of salt, but it was interesting and enjoyable to watch. The last thing to talk about is the mac and cheese bread bowls. I really like these. I've heard about these before the park, but I didn't really know what to expect from them. When we got to the stand and I saw them, I immediately thought they looked really good, and this was one of the things that I definitely recommend going to if you go to this park. It was my favorite thing that I got. I got the one with mac and cheese and pulled pork, and it was really good. So kind of like what I was saying with Pizza Mood, if you only have one day at the park and you can only get like 2 or 3 meals, I would definitely make sure that this is one of your meals. They're also definitely not stingy with the portions. I felt like they give a pretty good amount of pulled pork. Like, I would expect to not get too much, but they were pretty nice with the portions. It was a little pricier, but it is definitely worth it in my opinion. So overall, for my final verdict of Isle of Berk, I'd say that this is my second favorite land in the park. It was really fun to see, and just seeing how similar it looked to what I would imagine Isle of Berk to look like based on the movies, it was just really cool. Walking around it really felt like you just stepped out of this universe and were actually walking around a cartoon world. I really like the way that they had the rides interact with the pit in the middle where you have hiccups running through it, and then you also have the fire drill ride there. And then also just walking around, you could see some dragon animatronics. It was really well themed, and it was just a cool place to be in. So yeah, overall, this is a great kids area, one of my favorites, and I think if you're older too, you could definitely appreciate it too. It's definitely one of those things that people of all ages can enjoy, even if it's mainly kiddie rides. Okay, so continuing going around the park counterclockwise, we next have Ministry. I will say that I'm not really the biggest Harry Potter fan, so I won't go into too many specific details, but I guess I'll go over what I thought as a whole, as well as what you could take away from it if you're also not a really big Harry Potter fan. I know a lot of people go to Universal Park specifically for the Harry Potter world, so maybe there's a lot of people who care a lot more. But for me personally, other than watching the movies maybe like 10 years ago, that's pretty much all my knowledge contains, and I have forgotten a lot. So this was actually the first land we went to just because we heard that the Ministry ride gets a really long wait. We were really shocked upon walking in. It was definitely a good way to see what to expect from the rest of the park just in terms of the scope of the theming. We were really amazed by just how much detail there was and how they basically just built a city street from Paris. It was really impressive what they were able to do, especially with how well they hid it from the outside. After staying here for a while and visiting all the other lands, we did eventually all kind of decide that it's not as cool as we thought at first. Although it's definitely really impressive and looks really nice, we kind of thought that it wasn't as cool as the other ones just because it feels less like you're stepping outside of our main universe we live in. It kind of just felt like you're going to Paris, which in itself is really cool and the theming was really good. It's just hard to appreciate it as much as the other lands where it genuinely feels like you're stepping outside of this universe, or even the other Harry Potter worlds where I feel like it feels more specific to Harry Potter. So of course the main thing people know about this land is Battle at the Ministry. It usually has around a 2 to 3 hour wait. I think we waited around 2 hours, but I will say it really doesn't feel like you're waiting that entire time. At first it kind of starts with a subway and a little bit of a cattle pen, but once you get past that point, every room you walk in is really exciting. I think this is definitely my favorite queue I've ever waited in, and I don't think anything will top it for a very long time. There's just so much depth, and every room you go to, it feels like you're in a new place, and it's just really cool to see what's going to be next. I feel like there's also a lot of hidden little Easter eggs that a lot of people won't even pick up on, so the fact that they took that much time to do the detail is pretty crazy. The line itself moves pretty fast, so you can't spend that long in each room. As much as we wanted to stay in each room and take pictures and videos, we had to keep going. But we did notice a lot of really cool animatronics and little things that were just really cool to look at. And even ignoring the ride itself, it was definitely fun just waiting in the line, because that's how well they did with it. As for the ride itself, I'm not too sure how I feel about it. We rode it twice. We were going to ride it one more time because it was raining, but it ended up breaking down, so we had to just leave the queue eventually. The ride itself is kind of fun. You're basically in these really big carriages, so it's kind of just like a moving theater. And there are some really cool fight scenes. I remember there was a really cool one where everyone was fighting, and there were some really good looking animatronics. My main complaint from some of the fact that I found the story a little hard to follow. I'm not sure if it's just me not being super familiar with Harry Potter, but I did get confused at times, and it seemed like a lot of people in my group were like that. I think by the second ride I understood it pretty well, but it would be kind of nice if it was just a little easier to follow. I think my other complaint would have to be that some of the animatronics at the end just look kind of weird. They look very robotic, like in the final scene where you have Harry and the other characters just standing there. They look very unnatural, especially compared to what we've seen in other places. Overall, I'm definitely nitpicking. This is still a really good ride, and if it weren't for another dark ride at this park, this would be a very good attraction. The queue definitely makes it a must-ride experience, even if you're not super into Harry Potter, just because going through the entire room is really crazy. I remember when we first walked through the portals the first time, and just seeing the giant room open up, and just wondering how they managed to fit it all behind the city buildings at the front. It was just really amazing to see. The complaints I have are really only little things that I only have because Universal's done some pretty crazy stuff in the past, and I know that they could probably do better. And it's still definitely a good ride, it just wasn't completely for me. But it's definitely fun, and I would have ridden it again if it didn't break down. So as for the rest of Ministry, I don't have a whole lot to say. I think we definitely spent the least amount of time here, because as I was saying, we kind of realized the other lands are a lot more impressive, and we enjoyed them a lot more. This is the only ride in the land, and I think they could definitely use another. I'm not sure what they're planning, but I think some sort of Harry Potter family coaster could maybe do well. I think it would just have to be something indoor, because I think that anything outside would ruin the atmosphere. In Harry Potter, you have pretty much just a regular cityscape, so just having a coaster go through it would definitely ruin the atmosphere. So I'm not completely sure what it could be, but I think that it definitely does need something. But that being said, 3 hours for Ministry the first time won't be bad with how fun the queue is. So pretty much the only other thing we did here was we got some butterbeer. It was pretty surprising because the cafe actually looked just like you were just at a cafe somewhere in Europe, like Paris. It was pretty nice there. We also really like the butterbeer. Compared to the normal butterbeer at the other parks, this one had some sort of sweet cream on top, and it was really good. It's been a while, but I don't think I was a huge fan of butterbeer. I really just got it just for the experience, but it ended up being really good, and I'd recommend it. So yeah, for Ministry as a whole, I'd say that everybody could definitely appreciate this land. I feel like a lot of people are going to come here just for this land because I know a lot of people go to the other Universal parks just for Harry Potter land. I wouldn't say I was a huge fan of it, but that's definitely coming from pretty high expectations because I enjoyed so much about this park, so saying I didn't like it as much is just saying it was still really good, just not as good. You definitely do have to come here at the end of the day. Just seeing everything open up is really impressive, and the ride is also very good too, as well as waiting in the queue. So yeah, overall for me, it wasn't my favorite, but it was still really fun, and it definitely added to the experience at the park as a whole, and also the butterbeer is great. Alright, so continuing on from here, we have Dark Universe. The atmosphere in Dark Universe is definitely really weird. Compared to everything else at Universal Parks where it's like a lot of bright and exciting stuff, the contrast in having sort of like a Halloween monster theme area is definitely a bit different, but I really liked it. I could see kids being scared of going here just because of the theme. I will say that I think it should be fine for them walking around, but I think that the monsters ride and queue is pretty scary, and it might also be pretty scary for them at the nighttime. So going into monsters, the ride was really amazing. First of all, we only ever had to wait like 20 minutes because it has a really high capacity. It also has those same free lockers that's really nice, and the story has so much depth. We also rewrote it a couple of times at night when the line was really short, and it was nice because they let us just skip to the line instead of having to go through the entire queue again, so that was just a nice little touch. So as for the ride itself, a couple of things we liked about it. First of all, the ride itself was just exciting. It was pretty forceful, and there were a lot of jump scares that were pretty fun even after rewriting it like 8 times. I will say that it took me a bit to get the story also. It wasn't as much an issue for some people in my group who I think watch more movies, so I guess if that's you then you'll be fine. It took me maybe 3 rides to understand completely what was going on, but then again, we only waited like 10 to 20 minutes, so getting a couple rides wasn't bad at all. Even though we rode it so many times, I feel like each time we rode it, we came off with new little things we took away from it. There are some jump scares we really like still, and then we also just noticed how well the story was integrated. There's so many little things like the order in which monsters are introduced, or the way you see monsters interact with you in different rooms with different screens. And then also the way that you see Frankenstein help you throughout the journey is really cool, and each time we got off, I feel like we just saw something new, and we just couldn't stop talking about it. It's hard to go too much into the queue because we didn't really wait in much of it. The queue was really cool. Some people in my group said it was their favorite queue. I would have to disagree just because it didn't feel as cool as the Ministry queue, but it was still really fun to walk through. I was honestly getting kind of scared for the ride just because I wasn't sure what type of stuff to expect on it, just because the queue really went over the top with theming, so I was expecting the ride to be really scary or something. But yeah, overall the Monsters ride is awesome. I'm a really big coaster guy, so it's really hard for me to put a non-coaster as my favorite ride in a park when Stardust exists. But this is easily my second favorite ride and easily my favorite dark ride ever. It was really fun, and even though I didn't really see what it could be like at first, just rewriting it so many times and just picking up so many new little details every time was just so much fun. And the bonus of having AC and a pretty short wait was also really nice for rewrides. So the main other thing in this land is Werewolf. The Werewolf ride was okay. I was definitely disappointed by one thing, which is that the backwards part is literally just visible from the walkway. I remember since I didn't really know much about it, I was kind of just joking about it, and I was like, oh, I can't wait for the reverse spike backwards launch. And then I just look up and I just see the train rolling back, so that definitely ruined it a bit for me. After that, I was hoping that it would do something cool, but then it turns out it's pretty much just a failed launch where it just sends you back into the track you just went on, and then it just sends you forward again. You do get surprisingly close to going back over the hill, but you never clear it. So yeah, it's definitely just a way of adding length, kind of like Hiccups, but it was just a little disappointing because I feel like it didn't add much, and it also wasn't really a surprise because they didn't try to hide it. As for the rest of the ride, it was definitely fun. If you take it for what it is, which is just a family coaster, it's definitely not bad. I would say it's maybe just a little worse than something like Cobra's Curse, which I feel like is a pretty fair comparison considering it's also a mock spinning family coaster. So yeah, it's definitely a fun ride. It was like a 40-minute wait, so it wasn't that bad to wait in. The one other thing I'll say is that the theming was definitely pretty weak in the queue. Maybe they kept it that way so that kids could enjoy it without being too scared, but it was kind of minimal and there was not a whole lot to see. So yeah, I'm not really sure how much better they could have done if they wanted to keep it not too scary for kids and also going with the werewolf theme, so maybe it's fine, but I don't know, I felt like it could have been better. Another thing about this place is it was really amazing at night. It got really dark there, and just walking around felt like a completely different place than even just walking through it the day. I remember it was thunderstorming at one day when we were just walking through the lands at night just to see what it was like, and there was just lightning in the background of the mansion, so it was just really funny to see, and it just fit really well. I tried to get some good pictures, but nothing really turned out well, but at least I got to see it myself. If you're going to be here, I think this is definitely one place you should visit at night. I also can't tell for sure, but it seemed like something about monsters was just different at night, like maybe it was a little faster, or maybe it was just darker inside or something. I might be making things up, but we did all feel like it was a little different when we rode it at night, for the better. But yeah, overall, I really like this land. It was definitely cool to see Universal do something new that's not really associated with an IP and instead just a standalone thing. It was pretty cool to see how well they did the haunted theme and how much better it is than a lot of other ones I've seen. And it was just really fun to walk through it. Especially the first time we walked through it and going through the monsters queue as well as riding it. It was just really fun to not know anything about what to expect. Like maybe it was going to be the scariest ride in the world. I think the only really improvement that this park could use for this land is a standout coaster. I think having some sort of crazy like world-class coaster in this park would be really awesome to see. I think that since this isn't really a kids land, it would fit best here. It's hard to say what that might be, but there does seem to be a plot of land behind it where it would be really cool to see something, and I definitely wouldn't be upset if they installed another world-class coaster here. Alright, so for the fourth and final land, we have Super Nintendo World. This was personally my favorite land, just for the atmosphere. It was really awesome just stepping into it and just feeling like you stepped from our 3D world into just a 2D video game world. It really felt like you were stepping out of this universe even more so than any of the other portals. When you walk in, you're immediately just greeted by the Super Mario in the background and a lot of loud music and just a lot of stuff going on. It's super chaotic, but it's also super fun as somebody who played games like this growing up. Because Florida's so flat and they wanted it to go down, the way it works is you basically have to go through some escalators to go up, and then you get to the top, and then you're sort of in this top area where it just goes down from there. So like directly in front of you, you'll see a lot of like 2D Mario stuff, and then if you look down, you'll see Yoshi's and then some other stuff at the bottom like gift shops and rides. Overall, the aesthetics were just amazing, and I just really like this land for that reason. That being said, the rides, on the other hand, were what made this not as good as it could have been. I do realize this is a kids' land, but either way, I think the rides could have been better. So first of all, for Mario Kart, we found the ride itself to be pretty disorienting and just confusing. I definitely left the ride with a bit of a headache from the AR, and I kind of felt like it would have been better if it was just a regular dark ride where you're just going through some of the iconic Mario Kart courses. You basically need to steer yourself while also shooting shells with the button by aiming using your eyes, and it was really confusing and I didn't really know what was going on. I think maybe if we rode it more we could have figured it out, but we also wanted to ride other stuff that we liked more. Some of the more like dark ride sections where you were kind of just sitting there and enjoying the ride were really fun though, so I think if it was just a dark ride we would have definitely liked it better. The queue was also pretty cool. You're basically just going through Bowser's castle, and it was just really cool seeing a lot of iconic stuff from the games. And they definitely had a pretty cool sense of humor when it came to choosing what to name the books and just little details around it. But yeah, overall, the attention to detail was really nice, and just walking through the queue was really fun. DK Country was also pretty cool. I also like the atmosphere too. I feel like the Florida sun in the summer definitely really helped to emphasize it and made it feel more themed. I got one of the banana floats from the stand here. It was definitely good, but I'm not sure if I would really recommend it unless you really want it. I think it was definitely more social media hype. I'm kind of glad I got it because I like ice cream, but I could see a lot of people not really liking it. As for the ride though, it was definitely a little disappointing. First of all, we waited like 2 hours in line for it because it has a really slow queue and it also broke down. So waiting in that queue when it broke down while also being in the sun for a lot of it was pretty disappointing. And then the ride itself, although I knew it was definitely a bit of a gimmicky ride, I was expecting it to be better. A lot of the transitions felt really janky, which I guess you can't really blame them for considering it's a prototype ride that uses a pretty complicated train. But some of the transitions did just feel kind of uncomfortable. You can also see the track underneath at times. Our friends who've ridden the one in Japan suggested that the two of us who haven't ridden it sit in the back. and they told us after it was so that we wouldn't see the track underneath, but I actually did see the track for a lot of the sections, especially the drops where it twists more, where there's no fake track. So at the end of the day, I did need to ride it because I did need the coaster credit, and also it's just a new coaster that I did want to try, even if it was a bit gimmicky. But overall, it did end up being kind of disappointing. I could see why kids like this, and I could see why people would be intrigued when they first see it, but the ride itself just wasn't as good as I was hoping. It was definitely one of the more disappointing ones, especially with how long the line was. They also have the Yoshi ride here. We didn't ride it because it wasn't really an interesting ride, basically just a people mover, and it had a really long line. You could definitely tell that this is one of the favorite lands among kids because the kids just love it here, and all the lines here are super long. And you could definitely see why. For me, I really enjoyed it for the atmosphere and just how chaotic and how cool it was, just feeling like you're in a video game world, but the rides itself definitely disappointed. Another thing to point out is this land was also really cool at night. Just seeing all the Mario stuff in the background with the bright lights while it's pitch black just really adds to the illusion of thinking you're in a video game. It really just helps that much more with adding to the illusion, and it was just really cool. I wouldn't say it's a must-do at night like Dark Universe is, but if you can, definitely just try to stop by and look around. Alright, so now that we're done talking about all the lands for the park, it's time to go over some general thoughts and suggestions with minor spoilers. First of all, I really liked how the food ordering system works. At a lot of the restaurants, you basically just need to go to a table and scan a QR code, and then you just pay online and they'll just deliver it to your table. It was really nice compared to a lot of food courts at other parks where it just gets really busy and you need to wait in long lines. Even when the restaurants are busy, as long as you can get a table, it doesn't really take that long, and it's just a nice time to be able to sit down instead of waiting in even more lines just for food. Along with that, they also had some really nice drink stations, and these were at pretty much all of the restaurants and just throughout the park. It was really important to us to stay hydrated just because Florida gets really hot, especially in the summer, so we were taking it pretty seriously. Basically, they just have some freestyle machines. If you buy a cup, the cup has a little chip in it where it'll read it when you put it on the machine, and you could just use it like normal. If you don't have a cup, you just use your own water bottle, and since your water bottle doesn't have the chip, you just only get water. It's a really nice system for me who usually doesn't buy drink cups that just brings a water bottle. You don't just have that awkward water fountain in the back that has warm water that tastes like metal. You get some pretty good water and it's just as fast. And since everybody just uses the cup that has the chip in it or their own water bottle, it's not like Cedar Fair parks where you need to wait in a line just for water and you get a really small cup too. So yeah, overall the food and drinks at this park were just really well thought out, and it just really goes to show how much thought Universal puts into their parks. I really hope they'll implement it at more parks in the future too. I also mentioned this in the respective lands, but I would recommend going to the Mac and Cheese Bread Bowl restaurant in Isle of Berk and also the Pizza Moon restaurant in Celestial Park. I think that those were my two favorite restaurants we went to, and if you only have one day, I would suggest trying to make it to each of those. I feel like they give you a pretty solid amount of food for what you pay for, and the food was just pretty good in general. I wouldn't be disappointed if I got it at just a restaurant. As for some other suggestions, first of all, I would definitely recommend bringing a water bottle. I brought an insulated metal one, and it was really nice because it kept my drinks cold all day. And also, they didn't compensate it as security, so I was just able to bring it into the park, although it might have to be empty when you bring it in. We also used some hydration packs, which I would definitely recommend. This was my first time trying it for parks because my friend recommended it. I just had one in the morning though, and I felt fine all day. I usually get really dehydrated at parks and end up just feeling bad on coasters sometimes. But even though I only drank one in the morning and was really hot all day, it still helped all day and I didn't feel bad at all. I just had to get water a couple of times and it was good. Finally, if you're a big coaster enthusiast, I would definitely suggest going to Stardust first. On the first day, it was closed when we got there, so we just went to Ministry because we figured Ministry would be shorter in the morning also. I think it was maybe an hour shorter, but also Stardust is pretty much like a 20-minute line in the morning. We weren't even there when it was dueling, and it was still only like a 20-minute line, so it might even be shorter when it duels. But if you really want to get some marathons in on it, you should definitely go early. Also, if it's open, you should probably just go since it seems like it doesn't have the best track record with maintenance. It seems like a lot of POVs have only one side running, which was the case for us for a lot of it. But yeah, about 30 minutes into this video, that's going to be about it for this Epic Universe review. If you're not sure about if you should go or not, I think it's definitely worth trying to make it out there if you're a big roller coaster or amusement park fan. This park was genuinely amazing, and I think we loved every minute we were there. There wasn't a single thing we thought that ruined the experience or anything, although there were a couple things we thought could have been a bit better. This is now my favorite park I've ever been to for both the rides and experience, as well as just how well thought out everything is. It was really amazing that we got to visit this park so early on when it just opened, and I'm not sure if I'll ever get an experience to do that again. But yeah, I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, please be sure to leave a like and follow us, as long as following us on our other socials linked in the description. Thanks for watching. This is Ethan from Gravity Profits. Bye!